Generation 5 is the peak of the Pokemon franchise, at least that's what many of us fans believe now, but if we look back on the release of Pokemon Black and White, it seems like opinions were a lot more mixed than we might remember. But of course, this wasn't for no reason. These games made a lot of major changes to the typical Pokemon formula, and hardcore fans were not happy. For one, the entire regional dex of Unova was limited to 156 new Pokemon, meaning until the post-game you could simply not obtain any Pokemon from previous generations. Along with this, the region of Unova takes place in a loose representation of New York, instead of the typical regions of Japan. These changes set the stage for a soft reboot of the series, and it seems like Nintendo was hoping to revitalize the franchise to levels never seen before. Unfortunately though, the results of the Gen 5 experiment were an initial failure, but I don't really mean this in the commercial sense, because these games did do really well on the market despite being one of the lower selling entries in the franchise. The failure of these games comes in the form of the community's response. I distinctly remember as a child seeing YouTube videos harshly criticizing these games on release. Perhaps the worst of these criticisms were the bad design allegations, basically claiming that this game had the worst Pokemon design in the franchise because they made a trash bag and an ice cream cone into Pokemon. Looking back now, we can see how ridiculous these claims were because the first generation of Pokemon had literal sludge, eggs, and a racial stereotype as Pokemon. At least in Generation 5, the silly Pokemon had correlation with the region's culture. Aside from design complaints, people also didn't like how you couldn't use any other region's Pokemon in the main story. Look, as someone who is guilty of using Gyarados many times throughout the first few Pokemon games, I get it, but I don't think it's fair to criticize Gen 5 for this. We should look at Pokemon Black and White as standalone games, just like any of the other titles, and decide for ourselves how fun the gameplay actually is. Nostalgia is important, but the whole point of this release was to give the series a reboot, but I don't think fans of the series were ready for that at the time. I always enjoyed these games as a kid and beyond, but it's been a while since I've last played through Black and White, so I decided it was time to do another run. This time trying to determine if Pokemon Black and White were actually good games, or if the criticism on release was rightfully deserved. This game opens with an incredibly cinematic cutscene, instantly setting the foundation for this being a much more story-driven adventure than ever before. Once we start the game, we're greeted by Professor Juniper, who has surprisingly detailed calf muscles, and we get to choose our character. This time we can actually see what they look like before we choose. Once we've selected them, we're greeted with a really nice opening cinematic of our town before meeting our two rivals/childhood friends. We get straight into picking our Pokemon and battling though, so I decided to go with Oshawott. After losing to Bianca and beating Sharon, we head to meet with Professor Juniper, who teaches us how to catch Pokemon. But after this, we truly begin our journey and head through Route 1 to Accumula Town. First things first, I noticed that this was the first game they fused the Pokemart and Pokecenter, something I started to take for granted in new games. But besides that, we get introduced to the evil team of the Unova region, Team Plasma, and its leader Ghetsis. He basically goes on about how Pokemon need to be liberated from humans in order to truly be free. Because how can we call Pokemon our partners or friends if we have full control over them? I have to say, this scene really separates them from the other traditional evil teams of Pokemon, because if we think about it, their goal isn't inherently evil as far as we know. I mean, in old games like Pokemon Platinum, Cyrus literally wanted to reset the universe just because he didn't like his life. In Gen 1, Team Rocket was literally just a criminal organization. Team Plasma though, they have potential, or maybe that's just what Ghetsis' speech is constructed to make you believe. After the speech, a mysterious trainer named N confronts us and claims that he can hear our Pokemon talking. He challenges us to a battle and afterwards says that if Pokemon are confined to Pokeballs, they cannot become perfect beings. Well, all that was surprisingly philosophical for a Pokemon game, but it's time to continue on through the adventure. Before going through Route 2, we get stopped by our mom, who gives us some shoes that allow us to finally run. But after a rival battle with Bianca, we reach Striaton City, where we can finally challenge the first gym leader, Salon. This gym is unique because the leader you face depends on what starter you picked. Despite the type disadvantage, we were able to beat him with the help of the Fire Monkey Pokemon we got from a random person in the Dream Yard. After we get the first gym badge, we head straight back to the Dream Yard and discover Team Plasma just randomly beating up a baby Pokemon. I guess it is kinda obvious that these guys are not good people. Alright, it's time to move on to the next route where we encounter Team Plasma once again, who are now stealing Pokemon from preschool children. I mean, come on, you really want us to believe that these guys have a point? I don't know. But after evolving our Oshawott into Duat, we easily take them down and continue on to Nacrene City to take on the next gym leader, Lenora. Oh, and Team Plasma once again makes an appearance and steals the skull off of this skeleton. So yeah, we chase them down into this forest and get ready to enter the best looking place in any Pokemon game during the 2D era. Sky Arrow Bridge is an absolute showcase of what the DS is capable of visually, and this isn't even the end of the spectacle. Castelia City is Pokemon's take on New York City, and let me tell you, they did it justice. For context, this region takes place in a rough depiction of New York / New Jersey / Connecticut. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's relatively accurate in certain places. But when it comes to Castelia City, it's not hiding its New York influence. From the incredible amount of people running through the streets to the hidden cafes and back alleys, this place has it all. But most importantly for us now, it has a gym. First though, we have to do some other stuff. Team Plasma once again has been causing trouble here and we have to expel them from the city. After we do that, we head to the gym and face Berg and get the 3rd gym badge. Well, as great as Castelia City is, it's already time to leave and we're headed to the desert. But first, we have to battle Bianca and Cheren again. And I'd also like to point out, I believe this game has the most rival fights in the entire series. I really do like that since it feels like you really are all going on a journey together. But anyway, here we catch the official 2nd permanent party member, Sandile, and go train at the Desert Resort. I'd also like to mention how awesome these healers are in this game. In almost every route, there's at least one NPC that will fully heal your team. This has to be one of my favorite additions in this game since running back and forth between Pokemon centers and routes has always been a problem. Anyway, it's time to finally explore Nimbasa City, home of the Pokemon musical and many other entertainment attractions. Ironically though, we get a really touching scene with Bianca and her dad where we can see the realities of how a parent feels seeing their child leaving home for the first time. This game really does touch on some deeper subjects. Speaking of which, we meet N here and he invites us on a ride on the Ferris wheel. How nice. Except it's not really for fun because he tells us he's the king of Team Plasma and he's working with Ghetsis to save the Pokemon. Naturally, he battles us afterward too, and this battle is certainly not the one we should be worried about because we have to fight Gym Leader Elisa next, and she is quite strong. The only reason I was able to beat her was because my Duat is 10 levels over her Pokemon. Anyway, we move on to the next route and meet the current champion of the region, Alder. He drops some philosophical knowledge onto Cheren and I before we battle some preschoolers and evolve our Duat into Samurott and Sandile into Krokorok. After this, we cross the Driftvale drawbridge and make it to Driftvale City. Much like every other town in the game, Team Plasma has been causing trouble and we have to stop them. So we kick them out of the cold storage and witness the gym leader get tricked into letting some of their associates go. I guess that's not really his or our problem right now anyway though, because we have a gym battle to face. Of course though, this fight is not an issue since we have our overpowered Samurott to sweep him. Alright, next stop is through the Chargestone Cave where, man, N is literally everywhere we go. Anyway, he tells us that we were chosen, whatever that means, but we go ahead through the cave and evolve our Krokorok into Krookodile. Oh, and we also catch Ferroseed, our 3rd permanent party member. After getting through the cave, we reach Mistralton City, home of the next gym, although we have some other business to attend to beforehand. The gym leader Skyla meets us at the top of the Celestial Tower and asks us to ring a bell. Okay, now she'll let us battle her. Oh, we also picked up a Litwick here, our 4th permanent team member. We quickly beat Skyla and meet N outside the gym. He asks our Pokemon what they think of us, and to his surprise, they actually like us. This completely challenges N's philosophy of Pokemon having an abusive relationship with humans. We keep it moving though and reach Twist Mountain, which is really cool during the winter. After this, we make it to Isura City, which again looks really cool during the winter. We're quickly able to take on the gym leader Bryson here, but we have no time to celebrate since we're forced to go to Dragon Spiral Tower to meet N. Here, we evolve our Ferroseed into Ferrothorn, and at the top of the tower, we see the legendary Pokemon Zekrom, or Reshiram if you're playing white version, being summoned by N. After this, we clear Team Plasma out of the Relic Castle way back in the Desert Resort, then get entrusted with the other stone to summon the box legendary Pokemon. Oh, and while we're back in Nacrene City, we turn the fossil we got in the Relic Castle into our 5th permanent team member, Tirtuga. And actually after this, we go ahead and catch an Axew to complete our team. Now it's time to go ahead to the next city, but first we have a rival battle with Bianca and cross the Tube Line Bridge. Here, Getsus awaits us and basically stops trying to pretend like he's some great guy. He knows we want to stop his plan and is confident that N will be able to fulfill his dream of releasing all Pokemon from their trainers. Once we reach Opelucid City, we catch him spreading misinformation with Team Plasma, but all we can do now is challenge the 8th and final gym leader, Drayden. Oh, by the way, this city and gym leader will be different depending on your version of the game. If you play Pokemon Black version like me, Opelucid will be futuristic and the gym leader will be Drayden. If you play White version, it will be traditional and the gym leader will be Iris. Regardless, the battles are the same and we finally have all 8 gym badges. Now we can go through one of my favorite routes of all time, Route 10. Here we evolve Tirtuga into Caracosta and our Litwick all the way into a Chandelure. After Route 10, we go through the badge gates and enter Victory Road, where we fully complete our team by evolving Axew all the way to Haxorus. Now it's time to face the Elite Four. In this game, you can face them in any order you'd like. So first, I faced Marshall, who has a pretty solid fighting type team that definitely gave me a challenge. My Haxorus was just too strong though, and we took him down. Next, I challenged Chantal and her ghost types, which we handled quite well using our wide variety of Pokemon. After this, I faced Grimsley and his dark types, who definitely put up a fight. Considering his Krookodile has Earthquake, this definitely could have gotten bad here, but with our sheer number of Pokemon, we took him down. Finally, I challenged Caitlin's psychic types, who definitely could have been dangerous, we just had the type advantage with Krookodile's dark type moves. With the Elite Four out of the way, it was time to face the champion Alder, or at least that was the plan until N destroyed his team and summoned a huge castle. With no other real option here, we follow N into the castle until we're confronted by Team Plasma's 6 sages. But we aren't alone. All of the gym leaders except for Solange, Chile, and Cress come to help us. As we make our way through the castle, we encounter N's childhood companions Anthea and Concordia, who heal our Pokemon and tell us about N. Apparently, he had been raised completely isolated from the real world and fed propaganda that Pokemon are only abused by trainers. With this in mind, we unfortunately have to battle N despite him not really being our enemy. He summons Zekrom and we summon Reshiram, and it's time for the final battle to save the world from releasing all of their Pokemon. N's team is strong despite him only using Pokemon for individual battles at a time. His Klinklang is especially difficult to handle if you don't have type advantage over it, but honestly, he isn't all that difficult and we defeat him. Of course though, we couldn't be foolish enough to expect that this is the real final battle. Getsus walks in and tells us N is his son, and that he had no intentions of actually freeing Pokemon for a noble reason, but instead so he can rule the region being the only one to hold Pokemon. And now he's decided to take matters into his own hands. This is the real final battle. His team is stronger than N's, especially with his Electros that has the Levitate ability. Luckily for us, we have a legendary Pokemon on our side combined with a really solid team, so we take him down after a hard-fought battle and save the world. N decides that he was wrong in his thinking and decides to leave to decide what he wants to do with his life. And with that, the credits roll. Now with all that being said, this game is far from over, and its post-game is one of the franchise's best. You unlock the entire other half of the region along with the national dex, finally allowing you to catch other regions' Pokemon. I think that this post-game is probably big enough to get a video of its own, but just know that there's a lot to do here. In terms of the main game though, what did I think of it? Well, it's certainly as good as I remember. First of all, let's talk about region design. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of how linear this game is, and you know, I understand. Here's the thing though, if you want a good story in a Pokemon game, sacrifices have to be made. If this was so open like other games, it would be a lot more narratively messy. This game's linearity is what allows us to go on this adventure side by side with our childhood friends while progressively taking down Team Plasma until the big climax at the end. In basically every town or city, Team Plasma is either engaging in criminal activity or spreading propaganda, so by the time we do get to that big endpoint, it feels like this has been a long time coming. Moments like the gym leaders coming together to help you get past the sages, N riding the Ferris wheel with you, and Bianca's emotional argument with her dad comes to mind as super memorable moments in the game. Black and White isn't afraid to speak on some real philosophical issues like the morality of Pokemon, which was surprising at first but a welcome addition story-wise. Oh, and as for the actual Pokemon designs themselves, I don't hate them at all. Anyone who was saying bad stuff about them on release was literally just being biased, and you know what, in the sequels and the post-game they added Pokemon from more regions anyway, so I'm not complaining. In fact, I want to make a video specifically on Black and White 2 in the future, so subscribe if you want to see that. So is Black and White actually as good as everyone says it is? Yes, and if you haven't played the game yet, I highly recommend you do. Going through this game was a true trip down memory lane, and I'm glad to say it's just as good as it's always been. What do you think though? If you agree with me, leave a like on the video. If not, leave a comment telling me why not. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.